These are the Sese Islands in Lake Victoria, Uganda. As the light fades, people hurry to finish their day's work. There is no electricity grid, so no way to light the yard or any of the livestock pens. At night, a kerosene lamp is the only light available. It's a fire risk, it's smelly, and it's not even a very good light. In Uganda, just 3% of the population has access to electricity. The Earth at night, as seen from outer space, says more about our world than any statistic. Here, as in the rural areas in most parts of the poor world, Africa is the dark continent. In towns and cities across Uganda, economic growth is stifled by the lack of power. Ambitious businesses face a severe handicap. It is one of the reasons the country is among the poorest in the world. Getting energy to the entrepreneurs is one of the country's major challenges.
Energy is the engine for development. You can't talk of meeting social needs in the rural areas without energy. Today, how will you run a hospital without energy? The theaters, the diagnostic laboratories, the x-rays, in schools. Today the bias in learning is on sciences. How can the children do sciences without energy? Water is a basic necessity for life, but you cannot access clean, affordable water without energy. So I agree with those people who said that energy is the engine for development.
But what is going to fuel that engine? Uganda has no oil or coal, and it's landlocked. What it does have is the sun and flowing water. As over 1,000 participants from countries across the globe meet this month in Germany to give a boost to renewable energy, we report on another African power struggle, the struggle to get light and electricity. This swirling water is believed by local people to be the exact spot where the river Nile is born. Fittingly, they appear in the shadow of the memorial to the first European to reach this spot in 1858. Here, the waters of Lake Victoria spill out on their 5,500-kilometer journey to the sea. In 1954, when Uganda was a British protectorate, the Nile was dammed to generate electricity for the country's 1 million population. The Owen Falls Dam produced 180 megawatts of electricity. In those days, a civil engineering miracle. Today, overhead pylons carry hydroelectric power to Kampala, the capital. Incredibly, 50 years on, the dam is still the main source of electricity for a population that's 20 times bigger. 99% of Uganda's total electricity generation comes from hydroelectricity, and over 90% of that is from the single dam at Owen Falls. The electricity supply is a common topic on national radio.
There are so many people who are coming onto the grid and demanding electricity, yet the supply of electricity is not increasing fast enough to meet the demand.
As well as hosting the radio talk show, Andrew Mwenda acts as a consultant for organizations such as the UN and the World Bank.
The low supply of electricity is a big constraint on private sector development. And all studies they have done by the World Bank to do with studying private sector concerns, they have raised the issue of electricity as a major constraint to industries and a huge cost on industries.
Arua is on the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo and Sudan. It is one of the most deprived areas of Uganda. With no mains electricity, many rely on car batteries to power a TV or a light. But a typical return journey to recharge a battery can take a whole day. and must be repeated every 3 or 4 days. There's a mobile telephone network, but recharging handsets is a headache. Most people are subsistence farmers growing just enough food to live on. Some keep bees selling their honey to raise a little cash. Maria Difonzu is an entrepreneur from Kampala. She is working with the farmers to increase honey production and wants to sell in overseas markets. Maria collects the honey, blends and packages it at her factory, Bee Natural Products. But Maria's business is plagued by power shortages. Her machines need a constant and reliable power supply.
One of the major constraints we have in Arua is lack of electricity. Electricity comes 3 hours every alternate day. And that's an impossible situation for a factory to survive on. This is our processing room where the honey goes from combed honey to bottled honey. This is the first stage where the combed honey is crushed into honey pulp. The honey pulp is then brought into this tank where the combs is separated from the honey, with the combs staying in the inner chamber and the honey pushed out to the outer chamber. From the tanks, the honey is pumped into this machine, which then pumps it into the jars. The honey then flows through the filling line. The jars are vacuum sealed. The top label is fixed. The side label is fixed with the manufacturer and expiry date printed on. And from there, it goes to the receiving table where it's ready for packaging. We had to look at a three-pronged solution. We understand that there is a company that's supposed to install mainline electricity. We cannot rely on that because we're not very sure when that will happen. Therefore, we had to look at two other alternatives, solar powering and a generator use.
To finance the purchase of the new electrical equipment, Maria turned to the DFCU Bank and the Uganda Energy Fund. Starting in 2003, with $4 million, the Uganda Energy Fund is financed jointly by the Shell Foundation and the DFCU Bank of Uganda. Its aim, to provide business support and capital for the purchase of sustainable energy systems for small and medium businesses, or SMEs. If it succeeds, it will revitalize Uganda's economy from the bottom up.
I think certainly in markets like Uganda and in the developing world per se, the small businesses are seen as the engine room of the growth of those economies. Without a vibrant SME sector in Uganda, for instance, then I just don't think the economy has a chance.
We can demonstrate that these local businesses can grow and develop in ways that are financially viable and therefore provide a real template for replication and a demonstration to other banks and financial institutions that they can lend money to these sectors that are traditionally ignored in ways that generate growth in their economic sectors, predominantly from small and local enterprises.
With finance from the Uganda Energy Fund in place, Maria went to Ultratech, specialists in providing off-grid energy systems. She needed a system that would be appropriate to the factory's remote location.
All the bees, the honeys, come from a part of Uganda where there is a natural aromatic honey being produced that could have been easily transported to Kampala and produced here. However, the just-in-time production gives it an edge over any other honey that's on the market here. There are many factories that produce honey, pack it where the infrastructure allows it to. However, she wanted to go beyond that. She wanted to make a honey that was right at source, and therefore we had to take the infrastructure there.
Ultratech installed a 3-source energy system. Solar energy gathered from the roof of the factory is converted by these panels into electricity and stored in a bank of batteries. This is supplemented by mains electricity taken from the local grid as and when available. A compressor in the factory needs high ampage on a temporary basis, so a diesel generator was installed to provide power at times of peak demand.
Welcome to enjoy happy day. You are welcome to enjoy happy day.
The orphanage at Arua benefits from keeping honey production local. There will be employment opportunities at the factory, and with an eye to supply, Maria encourages the kids to keep their own bees.
Wonderful day today, wonderful happy day. Wonderful day.
And of course, it's a source of cash for desperately poor farmers.
This money is going to help a lot, especially in educating my children, paying their school fees, and then it will help me to complete my house, which I did not complete. And then, if possible, I will have a car.
At Bujugali, the Nile cascades over a series of spectacular falls. The site is now Uganda's #1 tourist attraction, surpassing even the mountain gorillas of Burundi. It's a popular whitewater rafting venue with 6,000 people shooting the rapids every year. The World Bank has agreed a $560 million loan to dam the Nile at Bujugali. If the project goes ahead, it will kill off the tourist trade, as well as displace an estimated 2,000 people. Its role in lifting the income of the farmers is questioned.
Going for big projects requires huge investment of money. And the only way to recoup that money is to have electricity highly priced. But that would not meet the government needs of rural electrification because the rural poor would not afford.
Centralized electricity generation requires an electricity grid for distribution, of which Uganda currently has less than 10,000 kilometers. Yet 80% of Uganda's population, together with 80% of the country's economic production, is in the rural areas. Mike Bess has worked on African energy issues for many years. He does not underestimate the importance of the rural areas to Uganda's economy.
Rural development in economics, rural development in services is really what's going to transform most of Africa. It isn't going to be megacities that are sprawling all over the urban landscape. And that's really the issue here, is how can we transform rural society? How can we transform the rural economy, rural service sector, in which it does make sense to invest, stay, and reinvest in those areas?
The Elgon mountain range is in the east of Uganda. The area is far too remote to stand any chance of benefiting from electricity delivered by a grid. The World Bank's best estimate is to reach just 10% of the population with grid power by 2010. Mbali is the regional capital. The DFCU branch office in Mbali offers local businesses an alternative through access to the Uganda Energy Fund. Leasing is a crucial component of the fund, enabling small businesses access to corporate banking.
Small businesses normally don't have securities, collateral, which they can mortgage to the banks to get loans. Now, leasing solves that problem because you don't need to have collateral to get a lease. The equipment itself is the security in the transaction.
And security has another meaning here. It's vulnerable to rebel raids. This girls' school in Soroti, north of Mbali, was recently attacked by killers from the Lord's Resistance Army.
We're supposed to have cleared the loan by last year, around June. But the sudden attack of the rebels in June made the girls go to their homes, and most of the parents withdrew their children away from here.
We had a problem accessing Soroti because of the rebel infiltration which was there recently. And when they don't pay, you cannot blame them for that, because surely their business has been cut down.
The school had borrowed money from the Uganda Energy Fund to buy improved cookers. The old cookers use an open fire and guzzle firewood. The new cookers are far more efficient. The school has to buy less than half the firewood it used to, and this from renewable sources. Fuel wood, or biomass, accounts for over 90% of Uganda's total energy consumption. For decades, it's been called the poor man's energy crisis, and it's still the bane of the lives of the poor in Africa. A recent report by Intermediate Technology has put smoke from wood-fired stoves as the fourth biggest cause of death and disease in the developing world.
The advantages of the cooking stoves is on saving to the parents and the school. It saves money. Why? We usually used to use 12 lorryfuls of firewood, and now we use only 4. We've been destroying the environment, I'm sorry to say the truth. So now the environment is secure. Formerly we had rusty cooking stoves. Now they are hygienic. And it's also faster for the cooks and keeps the food hot and delicious also. The food has become more delicious. I also eat the same food once in a while.
Where possible, polluting energy systems are completely replaced. Solar-powered lights have enormous benefits over kerosene oil lamps. They allow health centers to work at night in a clean, smoke-free environment. During the day, the solar panel can run a fridge, enabling vital life-saving drugs to be available on demand in these remote areas.
For the solar panels, the people who are taking these panels are really from the village up into the mountains. So we are using microfinance institutions, the village banks.
Reaching remote communities and administering what may be quite small sums is not cost-effective for the larger banks. Building partnerships with microfinance banks provided the solution.
The microfinance banks reach the mass better than we can. It's really hard for us to reach down into the people who really need the solar. The young savers who are just trying to, they save something little, 10,000, 20,000 shillings.
Poverty is relative, you know. There are some who are very poor, the poor of the poor, poorest of the poor, and things like that. But for us, we begin with a loan as small as $20.
The Uganda Microfinance Union now has a growing membership of some 65,000, which is good for the local people and good for the bank.
Poor people can save, and poor people can pay their loans. To us, that is very important, and therefore, they are bankable. They can be good business people, and you can do business with them and do profitable business.
Running a profitable and therefore sustainable banking business is a core principle of the Uganda Energy Fund business model.
Basically, we are here to make a profit on a sustainable basis. So we stand for profit and development. We will only support those businesses that can demonstrate that they are commercially viable, because we want this fund to be revolved over so as to reach as many people as possible. And the only way we can do it is by operating it commercially.
Juma Tegu runs a cooperative farm drying pineapple for the dried fruit market. Juma found he was losing too much fruit and had variable quality, so needed a better, more advanced drying system.
In the beginning, the technology was not very good. We could put our pineapples in the dryer and it could take 2, 4, 3 days to dry. So you find the material comes out brown, which is a reject already. So we lost much in that. We in fact, wanted to come out of the business.
The Uganda Energy Fund enabled Juma to lease modern, energy-efficient solar dryers. Solar cells power the dryer's fans and provide lighting at night.
The new equipment, just a single dryer brings out 10 kilograms, compared to the old one, which brings out 2 kilograms.
However, there is a glut of pineapples in Uganda, and if Juma is to get the best price, he must sell his product abroad. But this is difficult.
Right now, Europe is opening up to African products, except that governments in Africa are not ready
to do what the requirements for the European markets, because they want the governments to have laboratories where they can test chemical residue, they can test biological effects on the food and whatever. We are growing organically, but we cannot say we are organic because we don't have the certificate.
Juma's dried pineapple, just like the honey from bee natural products, will fetch a far higher price if they can earn an organic label.
Everybody knows the poverty in rural Africa, leave alone in the urban areas, but in rural Africa, there's enormous levels of poverty. There's a plus sign to that poverty, because it means that the farmers in the rural areas cannot afford pesticides. That is of a big advantage, because it means that immediately, whatever honey or beekeeping that they practice, the honey that comes out of it will be organic.
Unfortunately, farmers who cannot afford pesticides cannot afford to test their soil to prove it's organic or meet any of the other EU import requirements. Chemifar Labs in Kampala operates under internationally recognized codes of practice. The Uganda Energy Fund is enabling farmers to access the lab, to have their products analyzed and prove that they have passed the quality threshold.
We are guaranteeing that the quality from northern Uganda, from West Nile, is that quality which conforms to the European standard. HMF, heavy metals, antibiotics and pesticides. Definitely those ones, if we prove that they are within the European standards, then definitely our exports will be allowed.
There isn't a single prosperous country that does not have a secure nationwide power supply. Biomass-dependent countries, such as Uganda, will fall even further behind and become ever more environmentally impoverished until credit and affordable power is on tap. To people like Andrew Mwenda, debates over dams versus solar or grid versus decentralization are a luxury. Power and more of it is needed now. Without it, the poverty and ignorance that gives rise to phenomena such as the Lord's Resistance Army will grow.
By 2012, that's exactly 8 years from now, if we do not increase our power supply, we'll have a shortfall of more than 700 megawatts. So that Uganda needs to urgently address the issue of supply of electricity is a matter of great urgency. We need to produce more electricity.